Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the speakers and participants. We are delighted to welcome you in the virtual CPE meeting on technology as enabler of internal audit, being organized by Internal Audit Standard Board of ICI. The ICI has been providing continued inputs to its member through seminars, lectures, e-learning, and that's why we came across here. Today, our eminent speaker will talk about three topics to enhance our members' knowledge. First, the role of technology in internal audit by CA Sanjeev Sood, sir, and practical application of data analytics by CA Sandeep Bhole, sir. Third is leveraging technology in internal audit by CA Dr. Paul Jayakar. I would like to introduce and invite our chairman of Bangalore branch of SIRC of ICI, CA BT Shetty, for welcoming address. Please, sir.
Thank you, Kapil Rajput. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hearty welcome to Jnanarjane, Empowering Excellence. Friends, I'm really thankful and grateful to Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI for this wonderful opportunity to listening and learning from experts in industry on the topic technology as enabler of internal audit. On behalf of Bangalore branch and on behalf of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI, hearty welcome to each one of you friends. Today we are really fortunate and experts from industry. CA Sanjeev Sood, Chief Audit Executive, Max Life Insurance Company Limited, is going to enlighten us on the topic role of technology in internal audit. On behalf of Bangalore branch and on behalf of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI, hearty welcome to CA Sanjeev Sood. Hearty welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for introduction being
Friends,
given by you.
We have another eminent speaker, CA Sandeep Bhole, Chief Risk Officer of Atul Limited. He is going to impart the knowledge on practical application of data analytics. On behalf of Bangalore branch and on behalf of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI, hearty welcome to CA Sandeep Bhole. Hearty welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my pleasure.
Another eminent speaker, CA Dr. Paul Jayakar, I believe is set to join. In his absence, let us welcome him with a big round of applause. He is going to enlighten us on the topic leveraging technology in internal audit. On behalf of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI, hearty welcome to today's moderator, CA Kapil Rajput. Hearty welcome, Kapil.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for introduction being given by you.
Yeah, viewers and the participants, you are the reason for this program. You were always encouragement and participation in all the programs of ICI made us to organize all these n number of programs which are interesting, which are very, very practical and make us relevant on this challenging world. So hearty welcome to each one of you friends. Today's topic is very, very interesting. In this changing time, so everything is changing except, so change is only the constant remaining, everything changes. That is so true when in this pandemic, so many new things has come up. Internal audit is not an exception. Looking forward, the growing digital data divide between internal audit and business within organization will continue to challenge the relevance of internal audit and compliance functions. To support this journey, internal audit must strive toward a new, significantly enhanced internal audit value proposition, methodology, governance, and people model enabled by technology. This model should be strengthened by real-time data insights, continuous risk monitoring, and innovative communication of results. In the context of agile buzzwords and a plethora of new technology platforms to support it, such a framework can provide a concrete methodology which can support organizations in moving with rather than against the current change toward a more adaptive and innovative internal audit function. As business look to increase this agility in a post-COVID-19 world by accelerating their digital transformation, internal audit must move forward to meet the more complex needs of its shareholders, of its stakeholders, and deliver value for organizations. To summarize, internal audit has a unique opportunity to transform and demonstrate how, as a function, it can be wise and risk conscious, agile, resilient, and digital in terms of its tools and thinking. By adopting this methodology and way of thinking, internal audit can help lead the organization forward as new technology emerges. Internal audit function must stay ahead of disruptive and maintain trust within their organization. With this, more and relevant, interesting ideas, practical experience are given by our expert and eminent speakers of the day. Thank you very much. Happy learning. Over to Kapil.
Thank you so much, sir, for introduction being given. Now, I would like to introduce and invite our first eminent speaker, CS Sanjeev Sood, sir, for enlightening our knowledge on role of technology in internal audit. Mr. Sanjeev Sood, sir, is a chartered accountant plus certified internal auditor, a certified information system auditor, a certified fraud examiner. So he's also done the executive program in business management from IIM Calcutta. So we have a good learning session, I think so, and it's a great pleasure to learn with for you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Shetty and Kapil, and good to connect with you, Mr. Bole, as well. Looking forward to your session as well. So let me just kind of pick up from where Mr. Shetty, left on. He did share about few words I heard. Him talking about agile, delivering value, adding value to the stakeholders. How can we become internal audit as a unit or as a team or as a function or as a discipline? Really transform the organization, support the initiative besides providing the assurance work that we do. And digitization in tools, I think that is another element that is very, very pertinent. So what I've done, today for today's session is put across, few thoughts. Of course, each one of those specific elements of digitization can be a subject in itself, and one can go as deep as possible. But what I will try to, share my perspective on what are some of those tools that one can leverage, and one of those areas that internal audit, teams can actually embrace to really drive and add value. It is the theme of doing more with less. I think that is the mantra that everyone is follow, and digitization really plays a very, very important role and support, in the initiative by the audit team or the internal auditors to provide a very comprehensive view to all the stakeholders. One of the other important element that is now emerging, as part of the overall process, the expectation from the internal audit team, from various stakeholders. I come from an insurance industry, which is highly regulated, as you all are aware. So the stakeholders' expectations are of a very, very high importance, and it also keeps on increasing, specifically in organizations which deal with public money and which also have a very highly regulated framework. So one has to be very, very agile, and we no longer follow the approach of doing things traditionally. A very, very, quick example of would be that, gone are the days when you can say we did some sample testing and that's the outcome, right? I think the expectations clearly are moving towards how can one play a very, very important and decisive assurance around the population. You can't do that if you are not skilled with data analytical capability. You can't achieve that expectation if you are not fully entrenched with what is coming out and what all tests that you need to perform. And that's where technology as a big enabler plays a very, very important role. So with this opening comment, let me just put up my slides and give you a perspective of what lies in the next 35-40 minutes. What I'll try to do also is try to bring in a perspective which will be a more a practitioner's view of what I have experienced in my role working in two different organizations. My initial phase was more telecom, but the last decade has been more with an insurance or financial services organization. The reflection and the change that I have seen in the last 2 decades have been quite immense, and I'm sure some of the panelists also would agree with the thoughts that I plan to share. But before I actually build in that and create some element of what are the 4-5 things that one can look at, I just wanted to put an anecdote to say that how would what is the vision of future IA? I think clearly this is an element that one has to be very, very important, that when you're looking at digitization as a journey, where are you starting from? What is the vision that one is carrying for the internal audit team? And in that aspect, you look at it, of course, future of IA is to maintain trust in the transformative age. In transformative age, and COVID has given us a lot of learnings, and digitization at every step has become so important and relevant there. So just to give you an anecdote or an example to say that how would one see future of internal audit, and an example that comes to mind is it is like an air traffic controller, which is sitting at a 50,000 feet. You of course would look at what is happening from your independent lens in terms of how things are moving in an organization. It is like how you act as a control tower, where you are providing an assurances that there are no accidents that are happening. In case there are possibility of some accidents happening, then you raise that alert, through your internal audit issues or internal audit reports. I think that is a good way of kind of putting it across. The other, of course, is you can't just do it just thinking about it, right? One has to start looking at it is from the fact that how this can be achieved. It is easier to have a vision, but unless until it is supported by what one intends to do and how one intends to achieve that vision, it is of equal importance. And that's where technology come into play, and technology will enable real-time risk monitoring and timely reporting, and I think that is the key. And specifically, just like air traffic controller has to keep looking at it, some of those potential risks of collision amongst two aircrafts or some other accident from happening, I think that's where through technology, internal assurance team has the ability to connect the dots of what is happening, identifying, and in some organizations, this role will also overlap between risk function, compliance function, audit function. So I think what I'm trying to build in is that not necessarily in all functions internal audit has to play a role, but it is a combination of risk control, risk audit, and compliance in a way. If I have to kind of put across, or maybe in a common frame, if I have to share, it is more like control functions. How can those control functions play a role of an air traffic controller? I think that is the vision that I am just trying to put across, which is slightly different from a traditional approach of providing assurance on the financial reporting. I think the expectations, as I deal with board members, as I deal with regulator, as I deal with some of our management stakeholders, are of very, very different order. They are no longer looking at, and in my next slide, in fact, I will put across the maturity level, how that is moving. I'll just go there in a minute, but clearly when I am talking to my peers, across industries, auditors, chief risk officers, chief compliance officers, clearly there has been a huge shift, specifically in the last 5 years or so, which has moved towards this journey where one is trying to build in being more proactive. I think that is very, very important element. And also, how can one continue to focus and making sure that there are no surprises. I think the expectation when I talk to my CEOs is that please don't come to me with any surprises. I should be aware of what is happening. How can the internal audit team become proactive, in trying to drive that aspect. So materiality and high risk findings is of immense importance. And this operating model, one, of course, when one looks at it, also enable a high degree of flexibility, in terms of course, you try to build in through in-house teams in some cases, but you try to co-source some of these aspects as well. But I think the important element is how can one build in this element to really drive this behavior of providing a much wider coverage, and as a result of that wider coverage, a much wider assurance across the board of various elements of the organization that one is focusing on. So I think that, in a summary, I thought to begin with, give you a good perspective. I think moving on to the next slide, which I kind of talked about, and then you'll see what I put across as, a traditional way of, how things used to be, which is simply a assurance provider kind of a role, to, really how this role is being perceived very, very differently in the frame of what Mr. Shetty also mentioned in his opening comments, driving value for the stakeholders. And this thing is also moving exponentially. It is not a one-time frame, and that's why, specifically the speed of change has also been very, very fast, specifically in the last, I would say, 2 years. Corona impact, as you can say, but I would have seen the last 5 years, this change was coming. Clearly, when I look back of the way we used to audit 5 years ago, and where we are now, clearly has changed. And institute also, if you look at our institute as well, has done a lot of initiatives around building that capability, both around technology audits, also around data analytics. So I think that's one element. So if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, you will find, it's more like basic assurance provider, provide assurance on the financial reporting numbers. You don't look at operation. That's traditionally audit has been looked at. And that's one of the reasons why I would say that audit has remained where it has been, of course, 5 years ago, but I think things have changed now. I remember when I used to participate in conferences and talk to some of the players, it used to be seen as somebody who's sitting in the corner just doing his job, issuing audit reports, and then more like a image of a policeman or somebody who's a fault finder. That kind of an image used to be there 5-7 years ago. But now I think clearly the businesses are seeing how can you help solve business problems, through, of course, wearing your control hats. And again, I just want to caveat that this is not only internal audit I'm talking about more comprehensive control function rather than only audit, because at times one can get into this debate or that how can internal audit be seen as problem solver, but when you look at it, all the control functions together, I think the expectations are clearly moving towards that. So I'm not saying that you lose your independence and become part of the business. What I'm simply saying is that through your own work that you do, see the value that you are bringing in and adding to the functional owner, to the process owner, so that they don't hate you, they embrace you also. Of course, it has to be done with calibration. It has to be done by becoming more proactive and also being seen that you are driving value for the business. I think that is the frame that I wanted to put across. People might have different views, but I think what I just wanted to share is that what I have seen, the changes that if you move in that direction, it will bring in. So problem solver is a very, very important element. The next level, of course, you would have heard, in a global world, people really saying that, audit has always been, it's all about hindsight, that, whatever has happened in the past, you come back, do audit after a year, bring out issues, and then, of course, you'll say, "Ek saal pehle what the big deal," right? So it is now moving from putting it in a different frame, from a hindsight approach, which is, whatever has happened, it has happened 6 months, year ago, let's do that change. So that is more, you can't change what has happened, that is more hindsight. It is now moving towards, from hindsight, how can you move more toward insight? Insight is more, how can you become an insight generator? It kind of support the business in driving, better controls, right? How can you minimize surprises? Zero revenue leakages. How can you support in minimizing revenue leakages? Or how can you minimize any kind of non-compliances that might come across? So some of those elements, and I think that's the frame where one is moving from a hindsight to a insight view, and that's where you'll see on the third floor of my slide that I've kind of put across, that insight generator. So insight generator is nothing but identifying those issues, not what have happened in the past, but really what is happening, in a real time scenario. A very good example would be if you go and visit a branch or a factory, you actually see how the workers are behaving. You'll observe, right? One of the important element of internal audit frame is that one needs to observe of what's happening. What are the processes being followed, how that is being done. One is, of course, on the hindsight, you look at it. Okay, last 6 months, this is how the practice is being followed. So you'll frame your observation. But when you do an insight generator, you actually see things happening live, and then report out, your observation to the relevant stakeholders, that this is what, when I went there as an internal auditor, I saw this, and this, if we don't correct it now, we might be in problem in future as well. So I think that's where the insight generator frame come in, and that's why you see that the 1x, 2x, and 3x is a depiction of how can we really move exponentially on this journey, because the expectations are really coming out through thick and fast. And the final one, on top of the on the top floor, you will find a very, very important word, specifically in Western world. This is a frame where everyone is trying to look at and frame how can internal assurance function or a risk function or a compliance function become a trusted advisor. Trusted advisor to all stakeholders, including the board, to the management, to the customers, to the regulator. I think that is the frame which one needs to really apply to see that that's the ultimate. If one has to build a vision of becoming an air traffic controller, I think those are the 3-4 stages one has to go through. You start with very basic of becoming an assurance provider, problem solver. The next level, insight generator is the next level. And of course, your aim is to become a trusted advisor where you really get trusted around of how you are providing an overall assurance to all your stakeholders. So that's very important. So having talked about some of the expectation, let me just talk about this won't happen overnight. You need people, and you need people with that capability of doing and following all of this. It is good to have these jargons that's being talked around. I've also spoken about some of those, moving from hindsight to insight, and the ultimate aim is to become move towards foresight. But for doing all that, you need a very, very important aspect of people or the teams who you have to drive some of this behavioral change. So the first one, of course, is competency, that is a capability that is required, is more on analytical thinking. I think we need to look at, and as we build more internal auditors through the institute as well, you have to have that analytical thinking that come into play. I think great to see the new education policy, which talks about application of theoretical concepts. I think that's where analytical thinking plays a very, very important role in order to develop that competency or capability that is required as we move along. Communication, I have seen great work being done by the institute on this aspect. I remember when I passed out, there was nothing like focus on communication. It was more about, 20, 25 years ago, it was more around, we have to be very good at, all the subjects as such. So there was not much focus on communication, but now that becomes of paramount importance, irrespective of even if you are a rank holder, you need to be able to present yourself well. The communication is a very, very important capability or the competency that one needs to have. The third, which is again, very important as we move along from a hindsight to an insight and more towards foresight approach, is that capability of data mining. So I've seen now as we build along the expectation that was set across of becoming trusted advisor, I think capability around data mining and IT skill is of paramount importance. One can't create a team or meet up to the expectation that comes across, through the team unless and until you have that data mining skills and IT skills. When you look at some of the large companies who are moving toward in this journey of becoming trusted advisor, at least I am making that effort in my organization. I've seen this being done by creating a very, very important center of excellence within the internal audit team. So what that COE means is you hire people who are coders, who understand the data analytical capabilities, who bring in those data analytical capabilities along with them. You can't expect a simple chartered accountant to have it. So what we have done, at least in my organization and in some of the other organizations that I interact with, is creating a center of excellence where you have a team of people who are experts on data science, who are an expert on creating models and run models which can be used by the audit team. That's a huge plus if you are able to build that, because if you are able to build that, then you can actually drive huge value to the business, to the stakeholders, because then your platform becomes so big that you are able to clearly showcase and provide a much wider assurance, not only on sample base but actually on a population base. So those are very, very important. And lastly, no prizes for guessing this one: business acumen. It's being said that business acumen, unless and until if you really want to drive value and create a seed for yourself, you need to have understanding of how business is being run. It can't be just somebody just looking at the process and then giving out the findings. You need to understand what is the pulse of the business, what are the key risks that business is living with, so that you're being heard. High risk and materiality plays a very, very important role, and that's why it is very important to clearly have that perspective of business acumen. One of the ways to do it is hire people through a job rotation from the business itself. So I do have a policy of job rotation. I will try to kind of get people who have been working within the business for some other functions, but if they have the acumen, why not bring them on as part of the internal audit team, because they will help you create and drive value for the organization and for the internal audit team as well, and they become brand ambassadors for the internal audit team as well. So I think that is the frame that I wanted to kind of build in. But now I'll now move on to those 4-5 elements that I intend to talk about. But before that, just to summarize and also bring in this element of technology, what I've tried to put in is that clearly, if you want to move towards, as people call it, smart, right? Smart is also a term which is being very, very effectively used. Specific, measurable, action plan, realistic, and time bound. I think that's the frame. If you really want to move towards becoming a smart audit team, you need to embrace technology, and for doing that, there are various means, and I will talk about 4-5 elements of those which I have actually experienced and practiced currently also, and in my previous role as well. I've tried to build that in. One, of course, is becoming paperless, that is completely digital. Automated is another element where data analytics plays a very, very important role. So I think those are the elements which are very, very important, and this won't come, just by fly. You have to really have that vision, and of course the support from your stakeholders. It is at times, you see that this is doable, but ultimately you need support, you need resources, you need financial budgets, you need a clear sponsorship of what you're doing, and only then you will be able to deliver some of those focus areas. So what is smart audit? It is, in a very simple term, is trying to transform, and I'm just picking up word from what Mr. Shetty, in the initial comments built in. How can you transform the capability, that is there within the internal audit team to meet future challenges? I think in a very simple manner, that's how you try to build that in. The first element is, again, how can you be innovative? I think that is also becoming very, very important, and technology gives you a very, very good leverage on that. There are tools available, and I'm going to talk about some of those as well, which will help you drive that element of innovation, in your work area. The second, of course, again, being the term which has been picked up from the technology jargons, agile. Agile is the term that is being picked up by almost across the board, and agile auditing also, consultants use it very, very frequently. So I don't want to kind of use it and re-emphasize it, but for me, I think agile means is, how can you be not necessarily remain only driven by that this is the audit universe. I think the audit universe that earlier is there has to change, and the audit universe has to become agile. One example of agile would be in that, you don't no longer look at 3 years audit plan. You try and create a strategy of internal audit plans which are much more agile, more focused, a quarterly audit plan, for some example. So when I do audit planning, of course I get it approved for a year, but there is a flexibility that is being maintained, that say 20% of the time we will try and pick up of the business problems, and try to see how can we be agile in our role to really provide assurance on the business side of it. So that is very, very important from a agility standpoint. The third element again is speed. Gone are the days, I remember, say 10 years ago, the audit cycle used to be at least 4 to 5 months, and at times by the time you issue report, it becomes 6 months. So imagine what's going to happen to those audit reports, which talks about stuff which has happened 18 months ago or 24 months ago, right? So speed is also very, very important, because people are looking at faster outcomes. As I said, they no longer are looking at hindsight, but they're saying, tell me now what is happening on the ground. How can one provides that? So that smart audit also brings in that aspect as well. Digitally, I think the other challenge that one faces is that, from a audit report which used to get, before the email era, it used to get hard copies, used to get circulated. I was a channel accountant of those days, but now, of course, with emails, you do it, send soft copies as well. But still, I think the move on digital side is how can that be available to anyone and everyone just at the click of the button. You don't have to worry about saving your emails and all that. I think that's where the digital workplace, and I'm going to talk about that as well. And the final element is, how can really make the audit reports more impactful. So visualization plays a very, very important role. And nowadays you have various tools, user interfaces, which can be leveraged. And again, that comes under technology, which can be leveraged to a vast extent. ClickSense is one tool that we use where you can actually create a very good dashboards of how you see things from an internal audit standpoint. So I think that's a very, very important play. So smart audit is what I'm going to talk about. And if you look at my slide as well, traditionally you have to take a much longer tour to really achieve what the expectations are. But if you take a detour or on a much smarter technology highway, you will be able to reach your goal much faster with high speed, and also be able to meet the expectations of the stakeholders as they are building in. Okay, so let me just now give you a few examples of how smart audit function really works in, and I have just kind of put across those 4-5 elements. At least I am, and on this journey for the last 4-5 years to really build some of those in the organization that I work for, and also try to see how can, as an industry, as a profession, we can embrace and pick up some of those to really drive value. So I've got a slide on each one of them, but in brief, I think some of those you might be possible, but from a service industry and a high from an industry that currently which has got high data, I think this becomes a very, very important imperative for internal audit team to really start this vision on. So continuous monitoring is nothing but how can one pick up very, very small and try to build up your own models to provide a concurrent assurance. So this is more on the frame of concurrent assurance on the data. Automated testing of ICFR is internal control over financial reporting. It is like this is again a very, very important frame where I've seen some of the audit teams spend so much of time sending emails, following it up with the stakeholders. What we have deployed across is a very, very effective workflow system, which kind of gives you a very paperless kind of a platform to really drive this automated testing of the financial controls. And of course, you can interact, you can chat with your process owners in case as an auditor you have any query. So it is quite an effective tool which has helped us a lot in reducing our follow-ups and making it completely digital. Third one, of course, is remote auditing. That is actually a baby of COVID, I would say. This is that thought came across as how can one start doing remote audits, because in COVID times you're not allowed to travel, you're working from home, but you still have an obligation to audit, right? And that's where this genesis of remote auditing found, specifically in our case when we used to do branch audits. We have in fact now moved to even hybrid mode for doing branch audits. So remote auditing becomes a mantra for us as well. Number 4 is on fraud. I think that is another element in tough times, pandemic. The expectations are how can one identify fraud alerts and building on that element. I think that's where what we have been able to do is again use of data, some indicators that has been developed over a period of time. One can identify what is potentially going wrong, and this is your models. You can clearly pick up and focus on those fraud risk areas which can be proactively prevented from expanding to a much more larger fraud aspect. So I'll talk about that. And of course, lastly is a much easier one. This has been now there in the system for very long, a basic audit workflow system, which is creating a risk-based audit plan, everything on digital. You create and there are multiple stakeholders, but I think this becomes very, very important platform that internal audit should use, and it has been now for existence for very, very long, and people have actually embraced it. And people who have embraced it actually are using, have actually felt the effectiveness of this tool, this workflow system as well to a large extent. So that is a very, very important aspect. So I'll just briefly touch upon each one of them. As I said earlier, my opening comment, each one of these 5 elements, one can have session on each one of them, but I'm just trying to keep myself brief so that we effectively utilize and give a high level view of what all this entails. So continuous monitoring is a very, very important element, and this is a problem that each one of us faces on the expectation side, specifically when we are doing transactional auditing, right? So this is more focused on when we are doing a transaction. There is an opportunity for us to kind of build in and create some kind of continuous monitoring. I can argue that in an ERP tools which are available, some of these are also inbuilt in. So if you have a good ERP system, there are flags which can come into play, which can also gives you some kind of system integrity checks report aspect as such. But what we are trying to build in is that specifically in a transaction monitoring framework, if you are able to identify a business problem, you will be able to create a very good insight to the business. A very simple example of bank reconciliation. It's being performed by your finance team, specifically in a high volume activity. Is there a way that internal audit team can also parallelly look at it and provide an independent view? Similarly, for vendor payout transactions, is there an opportunity for internal auditing, provided they have the access of data and technology and data mining skills, and of course, to top it up all, the business acumen to really understand the processes. So if you are able to kind of build in that, one can really provide a very, very value-added role. What we have done, in my organization, we have started small, but we are able to now create a very good framework on this level as well by providing a concurrent kind of a continuous monitoring framework. If you look at the 5 steps in all, basically identifying the business problem. Again, you look at how was the past audit experience, and of course, you use your domain knowledge that you are able to build in basis the audit that you've done. So I'm not saying that you start doing everything. Identify the pain points and identify the transactions where despite audit you are getting repeated observations, and if you are getting that, then of course with the sponsorship of the stakeholders, try to get into this. Second step, of course, is gathering information for data preparation, identifying what tables. It is very important that you have access to data directly from the IT. You don't have to depend on the users, because then the independence will be gone. So I think that becomes a very, very important step there. The third one, of course, is testing and deployment. So whatever models that you have created, you just like you bounce off your audit issues with your stakeholders. You identify and see the outcome of that model or the methodology that you have used. It is throwing some exceptions. Get it validated by the process owners, because ultimately it should not happen that you continue to generate reports, but they keep on saying that this is not, your understanding is wrong and all that. Just like you kind of formalize this, I think similarly the outputs generated by your concurrent audit model should get validated as well. And of course, you need to create a good architecture, so it should not be an additional burden on the process owners. And I think nowadays, if you understand some bit of coding, you can create a scheduler. It can automatically throws out the report that goes out to the functional owner. So what we have done is we have run a scheduler which automatically runs without any manual intervention and throws out an exception report for that process to the process owners. Process owners in the morning looks at it, reflects on it. In case he observes something is amiss, he comes back and close loop with the team. And otherwise, he changes the processes or he make those corrections before the payout happens. So I think that is the frame that one needs to look at it. Of course, it requires deep domain knowledge, good understanding of the technical capabilities, access to data, and of course, sponsorship of your business stakeholders. So those 4-5 are key elements, but at least I found it really very energizing and innovative for my team as well as the business, because on a continuous basis, we have been able to minimize revenue leakages that was earlier happening through deployment of this model. So, take a shot, start small, but over a period of time, you will be able to create real value to your stakeholders. Moving on to the next one. I think this is a much more simpler one. But of course, internal control, financial reporting, as all you are aware, we started with this journey, 4-5 years ago, when this requirement becomes so important. Statutory auditors are also looking at it. So internal auditors, there's an expectation that somebody in finance or internal audit or internal control team also do the testing, so they provide an overall view. Of course, the requirement is for financial reporting, but in our organization, we took a call, let's look at the entire operation rather than limiting ourselves to financial controlling. And that's why, from a governance standpoint, the number of controls becomes large for us. It's no longer 50, 100. I mean, there are 500 plus controls that we are supposed to test. So that's where the problem statement came in, that how do you do so large of testing, and can it be done quarterly basis and all that? And that's where when we brainstorm, the only solution that we could come across was digital, right? You can't just work on a testing of 500 odd controls till the time you do have a good IT platform, you do have a work repository available. And that's where we reached out to technology team to help us create a workflow. And it's a very simple workflow, which was created by our in-house IT team itself. Of course, we gave them the specs in terms of what we are expecting, what we are looking at, and they kind of really help us deliver a very good overall processes and a platform which help us identify and know which controls are at what level of testing. Even statutory auditors get a good view basis this model. They know that there is a evidence. All the evidence is shared by the respective functional owners are also being kept, in the form of a repository as well. And also, there is a clear process, laid down process of upload of initial data to process owners. What we are trying to now link it is that all those processes are also now getting digitized and getting linked up to this process, this overall workflow system that we have created, because that would then help us also remain updated on, in case there are any changes that are happening in that field. How can we remain aware and be able to build that in? Similarly, once the processes, the controls are tested, samples are shared, the evidences are fully automatically uploaded by the process owners, being reviewed by the internal audit team or internal control team. And then, of course, in case there are delays or in case there are aberrations, you send out reminders, escalation, and finally review a fail or pass, and then within the tool itself, and then come out with a dashboard. So this tool actually has helped us a lot, one on the productivity front, and also giving a much wider view to all the stakeholders in terms of where we stand. And it is linked to our intranet portal, so people don't have to log into separate things. It's a single sign-on. People can just kind of log in there, and then through the auto reminders can kind of upload the data point there. So great help following the mantra of doing more with less. Again, an example of just simply deploying a workflow. Of course, it is a work of a lot of thinking, brainstorming initially, and then of course getting the sponsorship and resources from the teams as well. So that's the second one that I thought is helpful. The third one, as I mentioned in my comment there, this is an outcome of COVID, I would say. When we are not allowed to travel, how do we get? But the expectation remain the same. How do we get a view? Of course, our branches are working, because insurance is also part of the essential services. So of course, it's much more leaner limited number of people as allowed by the regulatory authorities. So that's where we came in of this concept of doing remote audits. And remote audits, what actually helped us, in moving towards remote audits also was our data analytical capability, because we were having access to all the audit reports at a central place. It really supported. But for some things, you need to actually visit the branch, right? You can't sitting here, do a bit of physical verification of assets. You can't do a cash verification, because for that, you need to be physically present. You can't actually look at sitting here, assume that the displays of compliances as required by the statutory requirements is there or not. You can't really look at the kind of documentation which is happening on a physical frame in the field. So what we came across was, of course, this tool, and we created a very good amount of checklist, and we divided the entire audits that we used to do in branch in two frames. One, of course, is off-site monitoring, as you can call it, looking at the data, identifying which branches are at what level. And then for the areas where we actually have to be physically there, we use the help of the collaborative tools that are available, Zoom or Teams for that matter, has been quite useful, where you can actually see that. And the third element that we actually picked up was our facilities team have those CCTV footages available. So that also gave us a good view of sitting at the command center of what is happening, and the branches as well. So a combination of some of those, but again, I would say technology and remote work really, has helped us clearly build on some of those elements to, move into a frame where no longer you need to visit branches. Of course, in this hybrid mode, also what we're trying to do is minimize audit physically going to the branches. Of course, some you have to visit so that you remain grounded and you understand what's happening on the field as well. But of course, we are now moving towards this hybrid mode as well, as we build in this concept of remote auditing. Moving to the fourth one, again, very, very important and relevant, specifically for us in the industry that we are in, which is much more prone to fraud risks. Clearly, what we are, utilizing technology there by creating a very good platform. The first step, of course, was to identify what all potential fraud risks that exist in the processes. I think that's the first step that can come into play. Fraud detection, is a very, very important element of overall internal assurance function at us. It kind of really impacts the overall, not only the financial aspect of it, but also the reputational and the customer interfacing aspect of it as well. And that's where what we try to kind of create a very good model, which we are calling it as FraudNet. We've given it the name, and it's a platform that we have created over a period of time to identify, multiple risks. Employee frauds is just one. Operational and financial risk fraud is another one. Mortality in an insurance business is again a very, very important one, where people try to, or sellers try to take policy on a dead person or something like as. So some of those elements are very, very important and have a high impact on the overall business. So what we are trying to build in is a very, very good automated modules, which we call FraudNet. Of course, that is an outcome of multiple quarters and years of working and identifying the fraud risk scenarios of what could go wrong. I think the question that I keep asking my team is what could go wrong in that process. How can we be ahead of the fraudsters, right? I think if you have to, as they say, you have to have that thinking or mindset to say that, just like you have this ethical hacker as an element that try to fortress your system, just like you try to fortress your systems on the fraud side as well, by trying to keep asking that question of what could go wrong and what are the vulnerabilities that exist in the system. And I think that's where we have been able to build in quite a lot of modules within FraudNet around various risks, be it employee, agent, operational, and some of the other risks as well, which has actually helped us identify proactively before the fraud risk become too big. You are able to identify those, and of course accordingly change the processes as such. So that is a very, very important role, and this FraudNet system is playing. Of course, you have to follow it up with a very strong consequence management through various elements, which is again as part of the overall HR process. But I think overall, what we have been able to build in through this FraudNet analytics is able to minimize the fraud risk, or able to avert the attempted frauds, I would say. That has been a good journey, and this is again the big module that we have this. And finally, I know there are 5 minutes left to my talk, but the last one is more on the creating a overall architecture of audit workflow system. It is similar to what you have in what I've discussed about the internal control of financial reporting workflow, but this is slightly much more deeper, and you'll find that there are multiple platforms which are available. I don't want to name it here, but you could Google it. There are multiple platforms that are available for creating a ecosystem of internal audit, which is much more digital, much more paperless, and much more easy to comprehend, and in a very simple manner, people be able to much more responsive also, I would say, to achieve and share what internal audit function is all doing, right from the planning and scoping, creating the RCMs, having a good repository of audit workflow management system, even all the evidences that you prepare, in the form of this, and of course, reporting. All those elements plays a very, very important role, which are the part of I would say, the entire ecosystem. So, from this 5, different frame that I have kind of shared, one can look at it in that frame to say that if you want to become aspirational, if you have the vision to become an air traffic controller, for the organization, I think that's the ultimate view that one needs to take, and one needs to take a baby step. One can't deploy. What I'm sharing here is an outcome of 4-5 years of multiple discussion, debates, sponsorship from my stakeholders, from the teams, because ultimately this won't happen without sponsorship of the top, and the sponsorship will only happen when people will see what value this thing is adding to the business. When you are able to show that you are able to minimize the revenue leakages by X crores, people will stand up and say yes. CFO would say that no, okay, you have the budget if you are able to deliver that. So some of those elements. And technology overarching theme, if you look at it, all those 5 elements that I've shared, the overarching theme is technology and data. Data is the new oil now, as they say. And if you are able to really build a world-class, best-in-class audit teams, audit systems, you need to leverage and understand both data as well as use technology for really driving digital automation within the internal audit team. With that, I'll just pause. In conclusion, I would say technology a big enabler in a digital world. All audits, and I'm just trying to re-emphasize there as well, all audits are technology audits. You can't have any audit which is not a technology audit, because you'll find each processes which are now there are in a digitized version. With that, I'll pause my talk. Maybe take on a question now or maybe later on. So over to you, Kapil. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We have a question from Mr. Prakash Kumar Ray. It's a question that whether the continuous monitoring concept is different than the monitoring mechanism which is in one of the COSOV component. If it is, please give a brief about continuous monitoring with example.
Yeah, so I gave some examples of continuous monitoring. An example of vendor payout, for example. So in case there are, and this is applicable more on the transaction monitoring side. I just wanted to re-emphasize that. So in the case of vendor payout, whether the payout that is happening done processed by finance is the payout is right or not as per the terms and conditions of the agreement or not. Specifically in a world which is living which is in where you are doing payments on a transaction basis, right? So for example, a payment to a call center vendor would be dependent on the number of calls, and there would be multiple elements to that as well. So can you create a model around that? So that's an example that I would share. In our case, we deployed, so every claim payout that we process, we internal audit team processes that through a concurrent audit model. So we have accuracy, 100% accuracy of payout. It's a zero defect process nowadays. So that is another example that I would want to share.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable knowledge and experience with us. Now I would like to introduce to CS Sandeep Bole, sir, our next learned speaker on the topic of practical application of data analytics.
So, can I start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll just share my presentation.
I would like to introduce Mr. Sandeep Bole, sir. He's a fellow chartered accountant and also acquired a certified internal audit certification from Institute of Internal Audit, USA. He is a head of internal audit at Atul Limited, and he is a risk management functional and participate in critical system improvements. He has an overall experience of 25 years and work in a various sectors. So over to you, sir, Sandeep, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Kapil. Thank you very much. Basically, right now I'm more focused on the risk management part here, so I'll just clarify on that. So I think starting my presentation, but before I start, I'll dwell on some things which have already been touched by Mr. Sood very eloquently in his presentation. So one is doing more with less. Secondly, the growing expectations from from the stakeholders from the internal audit function. And third is that, the changing the role of audit from the traditional assurance to more of a problem solver, insight gatherer, and a trusted business partner. So I'm going to talk about data analytics, and what I can say is that data analytics is a critical functionality, or it is a critical tool in the hands of auditor for all these things. Because just giving a background, earlier, we used to do the audits, and we used to draw some samples. So we used to visit some locations. I'm come from a manufacturing background. My entire career has been spent in manufacturing. So we'll go to some sales offices, or maybe we'll go to the factories, and we'll bring out a report which is unique to that particular location, to that particular factory, or to a sales office. But then nowadays the audit committees are asking, bossy, what do I conclude from it? I mean, you are looking at a company which is having 15-20,000 crores of turnover. You are bringing maybe some audit observations which may have ज़्यादा बढ़ के 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs का turnover impact. So what do I conclude from that? Is it a symptom? Is it something which is unique to that particular location? And what do I get from that? So then it becomes difficult for auditors to justify, because they have not been able to, they do not have the visibility of what is happening in other locations of the company. And so, the audit committee also does not get that level of comfort. They tend to believe if this is a problem in one site, is it magnified elsewhere? Or maybe, that 50 lakhs is becoming 50 crores if you have a low factory, if you have a company having 10 manufacturing locations. Auditor was not able to answer that. So all these things coming up, and so then this has resulted on a very critical emphasis on data analytics part. So going forward so now I'll go into my presentation. So, we all know about the internal control pillars. So first of all is the bifocal approach to risk management. So basically it is preserve as well as generate values. So earlier, the risk management was how to avoid the risks. Now it is about, generating, some kind of value by utilizing or taking calculated risks. Sometimes not taking a risk itself is a big risk. Then connecting the dots. So, risk management is, we look at risk management and we look at the management of new and emerging risks also. The third is technology leveraging, which is connected to the data analytics, which I'm talking about now. And then you have to build controls at source. So controls at source means basically they are what we talk in our control language is something called a preventive control. We want the control system in the organization to prevent the happening of basic frauds and errors, right? So it means your system should be robust enough to incorporate the controls within the transaction itself, so that it is properly authorized and it is carried out a person who is, responsible for executing a transaction. It is not carried out by any third party or any Tom, Dick, or Harry jaake kuch nahi kar sakta hai. So those things are controlled by the system, and of course the people with right skill sets. So data analytics is also a function. The quality of data analytics is also a function of people with right skill sets, right? So it is something, it is something of a very intensive intellectual exercise which is continuously, evolving. And it is important that people who are into the audit or, allied to the audit have the relevant quality of skills, number one. And number one, the attitude. The attitude should be not, something which ends there. It should be of continuous improvement and evaluation. So I think Mr. Sanjeev Sood is very, eloquently touched upon this people's skills in that. And so I'll move on to that. Move ahead. So what is exception analytics, right? Analytics is basically, it's not a technology, it's a concept. It refers to the use of technologies for exploration, evaluation, and investigation of business transactions. So basically, it is gathering some smart insights or some smart decisions or inputs from bulk data. Now, we are in audit, we have already been doing data analysis. This is analytics. The analysis, when we used to go to the locations, we used to, take out the data from the systems and, take dumps into Excel files. And then we used to run some checks to find out exceptions and all that. So that was a very narrow approach. Now, for example, I'll give an insight, or maybe I'll give some kind of an example what data analytics does. Suppose I have in the traditional audit, I go to a particular location, I find out the analytics of that location, and I arrive at some conclusions. What if I have a data analytics tools which gives me the same conclusions for all the 12 or all the 13 or the 15 factories the companies are having? Same set of certain. Does it help me or not? And does it give a better leverage? And then it also facilitates inter-plant comparison. And so on and so forth. So this is the power of data analytics. So instead of one, it's many fold. Secondly, it is of course to drive planning, gain insight, and optimize the internal audit lifecycle. We talked about speed in internal audit. Nobody here is willing to wait for an internal report which will come 6 months after the opening meeting. By the time your internal report comes, the issues which you have pointed out are either redundant or they are done away with, in fact. So that nobody is willing to wait. And this, if we have a data analytics which is driven by certain rules which are logically derived, it allows us to take a decision or to have an audit conclusion based on fact management. So it is actually factually based. I am an individual auditor. I run an Excel file. Something which is an exception to me may not be an exception to someone else. So we define the parameters very clearly, basis which we arrive at some kind of exception. To that extent, it is driving out the manual or the user क्या बोलते हैं इसको, discretion from arriving at the facts. And secondly, provide hindsight, insight, and foresight. So that is what is data analytics is. Yes, data analytics, by the very nature of it, it is system driven. It is not something which would come out of manual analysis or something. It has to come out from the system. That is the basic nature. Having said that, there are tools available to help us in arriving at those conclusions in a faster manner. So what data analytics is not? Data analytics is by itself not an audit observation, right? For data analytics, may you get something and say, oh, this is an audit point, you print a query sheet. That is not the indicator. Data analytics only indicates that based on the parameters given, there are certain anomalies in the data and it needs audit attention. For example, in the old days, if we get some exception through our samples in our audit, in our Excel file, we look at the documents and all that. Same. Only thing is that this start is, it is much more accelerated in the sense that data analytics will give you exceptions directly. Probably, so you will get an exception in 1 hour. Whereas if you go by the old traditional method of taking dumps in Excel and so on and so forth, maybe it will take you 1 day or maybe it will take you 2 days. So your audit in terms of timelines and speed is drastically improved. Secondly, as I said earlier, that particular analysis will be restricted to one particular location or one particular situation. So it will not give an insight of the entire or the whole. So to that extent, it is by itself it is incomplete. So that is there. But your start time, like audit Excel file, your data analytics is just a start to the audit process. But that start, it takes place much earlier. And obviously coming from the first line, it is not an audit to end to audit fieldwork. Fieldwork, you have to go and you have to actually look at the situation on the ground. I come from manufacturing background. It may be different from banks or other financial services companies. But in a manufacturing background, fieldwork is still important that an auditor goes. Maybe you spend less time on fieldwork because you have got very advanced data analytics capabilities. That is very much acceptable. But fieldwork is there. Auditor has to go and check out the situation, and what he sees has to be aligned or dovetailed by what the data analytics tells him. Then it would make an effective audit. Okay. Third one is that we apply some data. As I said, data analytics is based on rule sets. So and which is continuously evolving. So something which is not thrown in data analytics as an exception, it does not mean that there is no exception there. It's quite possibly that the data and logic of data analytics is flawed to that extent, so that the anomaly which is actually there is not reported as an exception. So this is the important part of data analytics. It is continuously evolving based on the situations which have been observed. So it is not that data analytics ek baar aa gaya, so it will run that way for the next 10 years. That does not work like that. And of course, no one size fits all. So, many of our audiences are basically practicing CAs. So data analytics has to be, and they would be having internal audit clients. So data analytics has to be created or customized to the requirement or the business processes of individual clients. Taking a data analysis rule set from one client and pasting it into other, that may not work. That may give false positives, or maybe false positives is okay, but it will give false assurances, which is even worse. So that's about that. And then we talked about volume. It helps us to handle bulky data. It helps, and secondly, I'll dwell on this one, second one. It helps in analyzing data available from different location and databases. For example, let me say, in case of a contract, maybe third-party services, which is there in all manufacturing companies. So you have got the payment data in your SAP or the ERP system or whatever accounting system you're following. So suppose to X contractor, you are paying, say, maybe 10 lakh rupees a month. Okay, fine. So that is there in the financial system in FI or whatever. Or maybe, and then maybe in the materials master, you will have, okay, how many hours or man days he has spent. That okay. But how many of his people have come in? That might be an attendance record which is lying at the gate. So data analytics helps in aligning these two sets of data I am paying out 10 lakhs to a contractor per month, but his wages which is paying based on the attendance record which is captured in the gates is only 3 lakhs. So what is the delta of 7 lakhs? Is it justified? Quite possibly it is justified. It does, as I said earlier, वो 7 लाख का it is not an audit query कि भाई आपका wages 3 लाख दे रहे हो, आपका bill तो 7 लाख रुपया हो गया. हो सकता है कि there's a lot of material element involved. So, but it gives you a start कि yes, this is an area on which I must focus on. And if you do this kind of analysis by Excel analysis, it will take you maybe at least 10 or 12 days to get the data and get the data in order and trying to arrive at a conclusion. So this is the power of data analytics. What comes to you in your hand, the best in an ideal case scenario is just the exception on which you have to work on. You don't have to do anything further on the data slicing and dicing part. So that is where we want data analytics. That is how the data analytics comes in. And then, of course, it provides the agility to the audit function as the speed of analysis is faster. Our role in slicing and dicing data and drawing samples is minimized to a great extent. It is an unbiased outcome, as we talked earlier. It is not based on the discretion of the auditor who's doing the role. The data comes in, the data is reported as an exception based on standardized rule sets, which have come in after a lot of thought and deliberation. So hopefully it will be a much better conclusion than individuals doing it. And it will help more in doing with limited resources. So we deploy the power of the system to the maximum extent possible, the human effort automatically reduced. So these are some of the kind of anecdotes. Earlier, this is the sample-based audit. One second, I'm not. Okay, so this is a sample-based audit. We used to try and try to get some things. Maybe we'll hit here, we'll not there. Quite possibly we may not touch here. Then is of course the data analytics will at least it will focus. So this person is probably looking at the eye of the fish or something. So this is something it adds more focus. And of course we say that we used to focus on limited areas. What auditors used to identify as something core. So this will focus on more, not just the core. We can focus on much more areas. As I said, that sample will be giving way to ample because we will be able to analyze much more volumes of data and how to do it. So it's now the data analytics actually gives a wow factor to the management. If Mr. Sood has already talked about it, how he's able to in advance prevent these frauds, or to leverage the power of continuous monitoring to detect the anomalies in advance instead of when an audit may take place 6 months or 8 months down the line. So here, there, and here. So basically, this is a shop floor, and here it shows the data analytics. You can do it from your office or the place where you are sitting. And ideal approach to data analytics. Now I know that a lot of the audiences of practicing chartered accountants. So to them, it may not be possible to have a data analytics unless the organization it's in for which they are working. If they have a data analytics platform, auditors may request access to the data analytics platform to the extent that it is relevant for the audit. Because data analytics, by the very nature, it crunches huge volumes of data. Then there is the sensitivity and leak also increases if it goes into the wrong hands. So one is, of course, how much access can be given to a third-party auditor is something which the auditor needs to discuss with the business. And so one is that to have we talked about the approach is to have an automated mechanism to track outliers, identify areas of control labs and cost optimization. So this is basically this is the thinking process of data analytics, how the data analytics report should be designed so that they give the best possible outcomes, right, with minimum of false positives or even worse, false negatives or false positives. So this is something. So focus on a few key areas, involvement of cross-functional teams, and develop competencies for in-house development of data analytics. Now, this is more suited to companies. Audit firms, it may be difficult, but I'll touch on how audit firms can also leverage some of the tools available for data. So areas, as I said, as we discussed, data analytics can cover entire value chain of the business. So I mean, sales to marketing to manufacturing, procurement, employee camps, finance and tax, IT access. So all areas can be covered by data analytics. One thing is that probably in case of if you're going starting your data analytics journey, my suggestion is that you start off with one area, identify the exceptions, design the report so that the exceptions can be thrown out. And as the quality of the exceptions improve, and as you get confident, it's better to move along. It would not make sense to look at so many areas altogether, and then probably you'll end up nowhere. So better you focus. Maybe you can start off with procurement. You can start off with sales and distribution, marketing, one area. Usme you make strong reports, move over to the next. Or while you are at 70 or 80%, move over to next. So long as you have confidence that the parameters which you are given are actually working. So this is something which is there for practicing. So IDEA, ACL, and other things are available. Are the basically data analysis tools which are available in the market. ACL, I think the name has changed now. I think I do not recollect it, but it is something which is available. So probably you can consider buying licenses, and probably you can initial part you can take downloads on Excel and run this analytics logic on those, and then probably you can talk to your clients how this can be built into their IT systems, and this can be an IT team from the company itself designs these reports. So this is how I would suggest, and we have to, once we get through these ACL and IDEA tools, we get analytics, then if those analytics data are useful to the management, then management would have less hesitation in committing IT resources for development of analytics reports. The ideal analytics situation would be that the company's IT platform is utilized to develop smart exception-based reports so that the times is effectively utilized. So the use of ACL and IDEA would give us is a step in that direction to develop those reports and get the exceptions and then move them over to the company's platform. And like we said, life cycle, we have got input from stakeholders. So this is the design aspect. We are still on the design. So probably we can get input from stakeholders. We internal audit also identifies risk. We develop queries and we have exception dashboards. So this is how we do. So all the parameters are considered, and this is the important part: query development or the rule-based mechanism, which will help us develop the exceptions. The quality of data analytics is very, very heavily dependent on the query development. So it is important that queries should be very, very smart and they should throw out quality outcomes. Otherwise, the downside is that probably we'll spend a lot of time analyzing things which are not really exceptions. To that extent, it's a waste of quality. So, these are some of the practical things which we can utilize, we can carry out using the power of data analytics. So one is the PO rates versus market rate. So PO PO at a particular location can be compared automatically with the PO at other locations, or maybe the PO, if maybe the data analytics is something like a continuous monitoring tool. The exception itself, if the query is properly parameterized, can be thrown up immediately, and you can act on it when the thing is coming up, when the transaction is done, instead of maybe 6 months or 8 months down the line when the audit is taking place. So then the other is buy versus ask. How much order have we placed vis-a-vis how much has come in through the requisition? Now this can be it might be that the buyer or the purchaser is getting a higher discount by some bulk quantities, so he might go in for a higher inventory because the extra discount will be compensated by the the extra inventory will be compensated by the discounts available. But at least the data analytics will throw up such a report: yes, this person, his inventory is buying is much more than what was the ask actually, and whether suppose if that procurement agency, procurement department is following some kind of a pattern which is not reviewed for a couple of years and he continues to buy the material as per his previously defined frequency, although the material requirement has actually gone down. So that adds up to the inventory. So probably if you have a data analytics, you can, through something like a controlled continuous monitoring, you can see that last 3 months the consumption is quite less, but there has been no reduction in purchase. So you can immediately plug that transaction when it takes place, rather than at the end of the audit. So something like data analytics. Then material shelf life. The material, this is procurement. So what we are buying, how much is the shelf life for that? It's quite, because vendors, they tend to pass on the customer the materials whose shelf life is expiring at the earliest. So we get the material whose shelf life is maybe 15 days from the date on which we get it in our warehouse. So I don't think our procurement cycle or the manufacturing cycle will be able to convert it within 15 days into a finished product. So to that extent, I have lost that product. So to that extent, so it is important that we first of all specify in our contracts that there should be minimum shelf life, and have a data analytics tools to see those shelf life conditions and all are met. And unusual trends like with vendors, like whether this some vendors are preferred, or in some vendors the PO is always made subsequent to the invoice, in the sense that it is material is first procured and then we do a PO as a regularization transaction. So we can identify those trends straight away by the report itself. Not we get the entire purchase dump and then we run filters and all. No, data analytics will tell you that in case of these vendors, there has been continuously cases of post-facto purchase orders being raised. Straight away, it's a starting point. Then you can go out and investigate why these purchase orders are, what is the constraint, and so on and so forth. So this is something. And then vendor master commonality with the employee master. So there might be some employees who have floated forms and all, and they are actually transacting with the company in the capacity as vendors. So data analytics, if you give them proper parameters, maybe on the basis of some phone number or something, they'll be able to track the vendor database and the employee master. There are commonalities and it can be thrown up. And whether the employee, as a part of the company's code of conduct, has declared that he is transacting with the company. So this would also help. Again, what I talked about is that data analytics is useful for complex sets of databases. So, vendor master and comparison of a vendor master with an employee database is a humongous exercise manually. May not be possible at all. But the power of data analytics will go through the entire list of vendors, maybe for 2,000 vendors. Maybe it will go through the list of 2,000 employees and come up with 3 exceptions. So this is the power of this data analytics. Another thing which happens frequently in manufacturing, at least, is that PO is split so that it does not have to go to the highest authorities and entertain questions. So if a smart report is designed, it will identify opportunities of PO splitting based on, for example, PO raised on the same vendor within 1 week for the same product. It is maybe an instance of PO splitting, maybe not, but at least it will throw up that exception. Then spare parts, we buy a lot of spare parts, and then we have equipment bill of materials for each equipment, which gives the list of spares which are forming part of each equipment. So we might be buying certain spare parts which are not included in the bill of materials of any equipment. Now, this requires a linking of the database of the purchases with the bill of materials for thousands of pieces of equipment which are installed in different plants. So if again, manually, it's a humongous exercise and may not throw up the results. Data analytics will be able to do that. Then third-party contract analysis, I spoke about one thing about the attendance versus the billing. So this can also be done by data analytics. Then there is inbound freight. Like, for example, whether I'm actually paying any freight on a material where the Incoterms are my FOR plant, I should not be paying anything extra on freight. If something is paid on extra on account of freight, I need to investigate. Now, there will be thousands of transactions which are coming in. I need to identify only those transactions where freight has been paid, right? So that will come out through data analytics. The manufacturing, likewise, gate controls, finished goods production, whether the yield has been properly reported, whether there is any anomaly with the same yield is coming, whether the production is properly planned, right. So it is not that the production with I produce finished goods, but they are lying in average in my warehouse for next 3 months before they are shipped to the market. There's no sense in producing. It is adding up to working capital. So if data analytics can show me what all finished goods which I have produced for last 6 months have resulted in accumulation of inventory, I, as auditor, can go to the management and say these things are happening. I mean, almost in case of 25% of your finished good production, but they are lying in the inventory for 3 months. So automatically, so this is the kind of information which management would this is which adds value to management decisions. Then you'll go behind why these things have been produced at all, right? Likewise, slow moving inventory loss trends, open in transit items. How many items which have been shipped from the vendor location or from one plant of the company to another plant, are they still lying in transit? They have not come in many cases. I have, based on my experience, I've seen items which have been lying in transit for at least 6 months because some people have not done their job. Material aa gaya, but they have not been able to record it, and this material is consumed. So these are basically areas in which these are, and I am aware of at least 1 or 2 companies where open transit items have been cases of fraud also, right? And then we standardized bill of material. So for example, the same set of 5 machines, we look at the BOM of each machine, you find that some of the parts are not included in some of the parts are included in some of the parts are not included in some. It's an exception. So only those parts will be identified by data analytics, not the entire population, right? So you check it whether it is correct, which one is right. I mean, not having the parts or having the parts. And usage of sensitive T code. Probably there are certain T code transaction codes in the system or in the ERP systems which are not supposed to be used by a particular person in the normal course of the business. It is an emergency. For example, purchase transaction is not to be used by an IT guy. He is having the right maybe as a system master guy, or maybe as a system maintenance guy, or as a system inventory module guy, just to check and all. So suppose if he raises some purchase orders, it's a warning for me to check why has he raised certain purchase orders. So likewise, we have got this vendor selection. So whether we are using the same set of vendor, how many vendors we have sent this inquiries, right? And whether it is a continuously same set or not. Then we have got the vehicle utilization, whether the trucks are being loaded to their capacity, right? Because the transporter will charge full truckload, whereas we are loading, maybe the truck is having a capacity of 12 tons, we are loading 10 tons on an average. Then it will, of course, it's not a query. There can be many reasons why the truck is underloaded in terms of weight. One is the volume, most important, but at least it gives us an indication. Then non-deduction of freight losses. Many times, as per the terms of contract, the freight losses are to be deducted from the transporter. Data analytics can help us. So these are the things which actually, like vehicle type, freight payment, freight rate outliers. So the data analytics, the point which I'm trying to make is that it will help in the auditor by throwing out exceptions itself. The auditor does not have to slice, dice, analyze the data and bring out exceptions as was done in the earlier years. The exceptions are ready with the auditor. He can start. He can go to the field and check out why these exceptions have taken place. If there's an anomaly, he'll make a report. If he's okay with it, it will go ahead and he will report it as this one, clean transaction. And these, as I said earlier, once the auditor develops certain exceptions, it can be passed on to the management, which can be coming out of the IT system. So likewise, we have sales, so unusual patterns, schemes not intended to be passed in sales, goods billed but not shipped, trend in sales returns. So finance, of course, duplicate payouts, most important. Normally, in an ERP environment, it is very, very difficult to make a duplicate. It should not happen. But still, sometimes things do happen. So in such a case, if we have properly parameterized exception report, it will indicate the possible instances of duplicate payments. GST credit not easy, then delay in bill booking, trend of changes in budgets. So I mean, where all the budgets are being changed more frequently. Then it gives you an idea about the sanctity of the budget process itself. And then, so if you change your budget in the first quarter, it is something it gives you an anomaly. Why this is happening? Then payment to alternate pays. Your transaction is to Mr. X, but you have to pay to Mr. Y because Mr. X wants to. So whether this transaction is correct or legally tenable, all these things. Then SOD violation, for example, in treasury and accounts payable function, a person who is creating a document should never ever be able to authorize it. Whether that has happened, so that will come out from the data analytics. And then the usual employee trends, the amount that I'm talking about employee spends here, and non-adherence to policies, claims on the day of leave or holiday. So these are the things which can become. So I'm trying to give in perspective. Okay, we have heard about data analytics and all. I'm trying to bring out practical scenarios in which the power of data analytics can be leveraged for audit. And so deployment of dashboards, so line function. So deployment of dashboards about audit. So as per my experience, at least the historical dashboards or historical exception reports, which are more aligned to the internal audit process, they can first be developed by the internal audit team after a lot of brainstorming and a discussion with the IT team, or maybe by the internal audit firm based on his experience in other places and all. So he can design a report on his ACL or the tool which he may take a license. Then it will be tested on the data of the corporate by the audit team. Once it is proven that these reports are correct, then they can be passed on to these functions, the line function and the control function, so that it becomes something like a self-audit. So line function itself runs these reports on a monthly or quarterly or maybe weekly basis and identifies anomalies and corrects it. Likewise, the control function also checks whether the line function has reviewed that. And the only role of the audit team will be left is to ensure that data analytics reports are generally leveraged by these teams. And his work will move on to developing newer reports and adding newer value. So this is how the cycle. This is how I look at the cycle for developing the data. And we talked about this continuous monitoring mechanism. We are in a violation in policies, first and second line defense with insights to take action. So this should happen after the reports are developed and thoroughly tested and back tested by the internal audit team, and all the anomalies are taken care, and then they are passed on to them. Half-baked reports, passing them to first and second line teams would actually may result in the loss of management time. The objective of audit is to add value, and this is how audit can really add value. And a change in business processes to unlock value. If we are getting certain areas, we are getting continuous exceptions, then it indicates that the process itself needs to be revised. And then, of course, it will be reducing in the overall audit cost, in the sense that suppose you have in-house team and you have got a very strong data analytics support from the organization, probably you would lead a lesser number of auditors. Probably you would need a lesser number of traveling to locations. So all this, helps in overall reduction of audit cost and better control assurance. So how these dashboards will look? So these are some of the dashboards. So it was like discount availed and loss. So basically, you have, this is just an example. So you can have these dashboards developed graphically, which will give you an indicator, and it is much more visually appealing to have something in the form of a graph rather than a set of data. So data analytics would give you such kind of graphs by which you can take an action. For example, these are instances where discount had been lost because GRN, goods receipt note in the ERP system, could not be performed in time by the stores team and all. So if this trend is continuing, then the store team has to be taken to task why this is happening. And maybe you'll find the store team has not done because the quality guy has not done it. So this message has to be percolated that your delay in doing your work is actually costing an organization this much loss. Now this amount will be documented. This will be amount will be coming into forefront, and this report can be passed on to the quality guy and say, hey, in this last 6 months, we have lost discounts of over 10 lakhs because you have not been able to come and you do your quality checks in time. So imagine the kind of the leverage or the sharper focus it brings across all levels in the organization. Quality guy is generally least concerned with the financial term. उसको लगता है वो finance का ही काम है. But if we are able to give things to him like this, he will know how to prioritize his own work, right? So likewise, we'll get a potential duplicate payments. Probably we'll find that 6,78,000 is look like it's not that every payment is a duplicate, but at least it will help us to focus on these payments. So this is how the data analytics helps us in getting graphical reports. And like the other things like TADA claimed on days of non-market. So this is there. Then local conveyance analysis. So then, how it will throw up the exceptions. Likewise, the claims on the day of leave, hotel and FDA, conveyance claims on the day of. So the end number of things where data analytics can be applied. It is controlled only by imagination, and it is something which the data analytics and mind you, we can have a separate session on procurement data analytics. We can have a separate session on sales analytics. So, and it will not be a 40-minute, 50-minute session. It can be 3-hour session. So much are the things which can be done in data analytics. These are the samples which will help auditor to identify areas where he can run the data analytics. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Mr. Prakash Kumar Ray. In open in transit item, if the item inward is not recorded at gate and directly went to shop floor and consumed, then how can we identify those cases?
See, if an item is going to the shop floor and consumed, right, you cannot identify through the system, right? Because that consumption entry will not be there in the system. There will be no GRN also in the system. But what will show in the system is that this item is lying in transit for the past 6 months. If something is, for example, the 2 plants or 2 locations are maybe 100 kilometers apart, logically it does not make sense that these items should be in transit for 1 month or 2 months or anything beyond 2 or 4 days. So if the data analytics is able to throw out if these items are lying in transit for more than 6 months, then you go and you check and you find that these items have been consumed. Now, then you have to look at, so data analytics, as I said, it is only an indicator from where to start. So you go and find out how these materials have entered into the gate without getting the GRN, right? Normally in any ERP-driven organization, it is important that you create a goods receipt before you issue the material for production. So first of all, how has this material come into the gate? How many of such materials have gone into the gate? And conversely, how many, if gate controls are such, how many such items have actually gone out of the gate without being recorded? So auditor has a lot of just this simple transaction gives so many things to the auditor to think about, right? As I said, data analytics is not an audit report. Usme se kuch aaya and it becomes an audit. No, it is a starting point for auditor to apply its audit processes effectively and in a focused manner. So so someone has done a GRN. And then someone has taken it directly to production. How can he produce? So how are his consumption records accounted? If I produce something, I need to in the backend, I need to have consumption posting. So either my production consumption is also wrong, because if my consumption is wrong, the cost will be posted wrong. So just a small thing. This is thank you for asking this question. It is giving insight to so many other things.
Very well, sir. It's a very thankful for us, all of us, sir, you are sharing such a practical knowledge with us, and we thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce all CA Dr. Paul Jayakar, sir. our next learned speaker on the topic of leveraging technology in internal audit. Over to you, sir.
Good evening to all the learned members on the panel. I also want to thank our host today, Mr. Kapil. I also want to thank the entire IASB and also for the speaker who could not make it today. We wish him a very speedy recovery. It's a short session, and what I'm going to do is I don't have a presentation, but I will go through the various screens so that I can quickly show you what I'm planning to do. I think I'll have to start from the beginning to make it clear. What I'll do is I'll start by sharing the browser. So open the browser. Let me give you a brief background about what I want to do. See, what I'm going to do is quickly run through. Most of you would have sat through a large number of these lectures. It's been going on for quite some time. And one of the standard questions we get is, how do we use the tools in our own system? We have heard our speakers also tell us there are lots of tools for data analytics, for audit. How do we use these tools? So today I'm just concentrating on the commands. Actually, they're not even tools. Commands built into the operating system of a standard home PC, a Windows PC. It will not get us into those real audit report or log analysis kind of output, but it will help us to understand the data which is being stored in these systems. So I'll go one by one. I know this has to be built up much better with, actually most of the time we use open source tools like Kali Linux and so on, because even Nessus has become paid now. So open source works well, but many clients, particularly the large MNC clients, they do not allow open source. Then the auditor can invest in the tool, but actually don't have to buy it. We can go for that 1 month subscription or 6 month subscription because we don't know whether the tool will really be useful for the next audit. We also don't know if the tool may get a better tool at some point in time. So what I'll do is I'll just explain the facilities available, and then what we can do is, maybe we could follow it up, or maybe some subsequent class. We will go through a slightly bigger set of tools, but then the bigger set of tools means you have to download them, install them. Here, there's nothing to download. Each of you can try it out when you go back. Now, the first thing I will do is I'm running a tool called the Bellark Advisor. Obviously, this has to be downloaded. So you'll have to download the tool. If I open the browser, see, the tool we are using is called a Bellark Advisor. So that's the tool we are using. And you'll find somewhere it opens up. You just click on this. It's a straightforward install. It's more like a DOS install. There is no complication, nothing, just install it. So it's a very straightforward tool. We've been using it for a very long time. Now, why would you need this tool? Now, it says my screen sharing has paused. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Is it visible?
Okay. Actually, I'm now sharing the screen, and I've started this software called the Bellark Advisor. It takes a few seconds to read the data and then pick up the information from the system. So right now it's analyzing, it's kind of picking up the information about what's in the machine, what's in the laptop. I'm using a Windows Home, Windows 10 Home version. It's a very standard laptop, so it's a HP laptop. Only thing is when it picks up the network, it goes a little slow because except internet, I don't have anything else. This is not connected to a network. I mean, right now it's standalone. I'm taking this class from my home, so I didn't connect it to any network. It's only on the internet. It's a standard DSL connection. And I just let it run, so it takes a few seconds. Now, what it's doing is it is analyzing and identifying all the hardware, software, license, everything in the system. So if you see the output, it has generated it in the browser. This is a Chrome browser. Whatever I'm using is a Chrome browser. It's very simple. So all you have to do is download the Velark. Actually, I started by saying they're all built in. But this is one utility in today's session where you have to download and install it. That's it. And then everything else moves off. Now, if you see, it gives you a summary here. The score it has picked up. Then it's a home computer, so I don't really keep much there. This is your whatever is up to date and whatever is missing in the security updates. One is missing, so obviously it's pending an update. Now, if you go through this summary, now I just enlarge the screen. I enlarge the screen now. Now, if you go to this summary, what you'll find is it gives you the laptop name, whatever, the date, etc., all that. But the main thing is, why would you need this? Because there are many times when an auditor is asked to check some hardware, and normally what you do is, I'm particularly thinking of those ITGC audits, which you could do in a bank or any large organization, BPOs, or sometimes even banks also. So what you do is you don't use a random number in Excel, use a random sample generator in Excel. That's very reliable. And maybe it picked up 5 machines out of say 400. Which those particular 5 machines, if you run this, you will know everything about it. I mean, whatever the asset register says, or if it's a fresh purchase, of course, you'll have the invoice. You'll know everything, whatever the system has got. And as you come down, you'll also notice that you get all the details you require about the processor. You will also get your circuit board and all its numbers. Because today we have very good pirates who also pirate ROMs, the BIOS and the ROM on motherboards. Okay, maybe it's not done in India, it could be done somewhere outside India. It's like your duplicate IME numbers, so same thing. Since cell phones are easily tracked, they get caught, but computers nobody tracks. Only Windows tracks if it's online. But then if you're using Linux or something, it doesn't really matter. So maybe you're checking your purchase or something, then you just want to make sure everything is as per the invoice or as per the asset register. It gives you a drive capacity. It tells you what drive you have. Sometimes during service, actually it's got a SSD and a hard disk. Sometimes during service, the service people replace your expensive original equipment with cheaper Chinese equivalents, and they may sell these elsewhere. I'm not talking about the authorized service. Maybe after 1 year, 2 years, you have a local ID man coming in. So that's another problem. And you can also see all the memory, whatever the drives set up, its capacity. And okay, this is all the hardware point of view. Now, if you go a little further down, we could, all these are the hardware. So you can see I'm running a free virus, AVG antivirus. McAfee needs a subscription. So after it ran for the free period, then it's off. So didn't pay for it. So this is, AVG is a free antivirus. It's actually very good. So I keep running this, and this is kind of stopped. It's still there. I haven't did it, so it's switched off. And you can also see that all your communication adapters. Now this becomes necessary if you are suspecting weaknesses in the system, particularly when people break into your networks. And out here, I'll just do one thing. I'll just switch off my camera for the bandwidth. Okay, so So out here, if you see the other devices, whatever it has got, multiple microphones, so some of the software doesn't pick up certain microphones and speakers, so I keep some spare stuff for Gmeet or Google Meet and so on. All that, whatever is installed has come out here. And then if you go even further down, it also shows you the USB in use last 30 days. USB port is not locked, it's open. But I have not used an USB drive, a pen drive. I don't use one. So sometimes in a secure situation, you want to know whether somebody unlocked the drive, used a USB or something. This is enough evidence that, okay, they didn't use it or they did use it. I mean, if it was used, it will show it here. Then you have your network mapping, is all the, basically the addresses. This is the, where the service provider's router is. So that's the gateway out to the internet. And then you have security updates which are missing. So since I don't know any of the official work, so there's no Adobe, Apple I don't use at all. Java is mainly for filing purposes, so I only use the compiler. Microsoft, it has to be up to date. One update was missing, so I have to update it now. Then any missing security updates will be shown to you. Now, how do we get this thing? You have to get a CPE document and see how important it is. It says this particular update is severe. I mean, it's important, so we have to update it. Okay, maybe we'll do it later. And then you get your software licenses, which is one of the most important things when you do your audit of purchases or audit of the hardware. Piracy is a common crime, and legal software costs a lot of money. So you'll end up with all your serial numbers, which obviously we'll have to check because sometimes it's stuck on the machine. Sometimes you'll have a paper license, so you'll have to get those original numbers and check them out. Of course, it'll show the key and it'll show you everything you want. Then the rest of these are all the other software running. In fact, you can see Bellark also, he has just installed it this morning. But anyway, yeah, we can go through all the different software, and you can also see for any, if you want to get any details, you just click on this thing. So you will get your details. And if you click on it, of course, it will open up how many times this iTunes actually ran and what are all the stuff it's got with it. Anyway, right now, I'm just going back. So we were here. Now, for any of these software, so in fact, Zoom, right now we're using Zoom. You can see there's a lot of Foxit software. That's the PDF editor which is used. And HV audio, of course, it helps us with the mics. So if we come down somewhere, we'll find, okay, Skype and so on. And Zoom video is here. So if you go over there, you'll see the information when it started. So I have started it. Today was the last start was today. I started by 6:40. If you click on it, it'll give you all the information required, all the DLLs, whatever it is running. Okay, so that should give us sufficient information about our software. It gives a lot of information on the software and usage. And then, of course, we don't have anything 1 year old and so on. Of course, we do have a few. For the writing tablet I've been using. So some of them, of course, the unused ones, we normally recommend they should be removed as part of the hardening. Okay, why I switched off the video was the bandwidth was a little low. But if my voice is breaking, please tell me, then I'll switch off the video. So here we have those unused ones. So Python, actually there's a different compiler we use. So the original Python download is sitting idle. So you can find idle unused software also. So the legend here tells you more than 1 year, 90 days to 1 year, and so on. Then here all your hot fixes. Actually, this is part of your audit where you have to certify that particularly when you have ransomware problems, you have to certify that all the updates are current. Unfortunately, my updates are not current, so there was one critical update pending, but these are the recent updates. And then it shows you the various informations like a kind of a help file. Now you can go anywhere and click wherever you want. If you click software usage, you'll get this. Or if you check the licenses, it's up there. USB storage will be up here. So this is it's a free software actually. You're not supposed to use it commercially. If you use it commercially also, it's very cheap. And it's almost a 20-year-old software. I mean, it's not 20-year-old. It's there for 20 years, updated regularly. So I find this very convenient when you're doing those one-off machines of 5 samples or 10 samples. This is a lot easier to use because it's a browser. You can convert it to XML. Somewhere you'll have a command very code. Export this to XML and it's basically an HTML file. You could store it, or you can save this web page as it is. You can click and save as also. So anyway, this is the first tool which because we are now talking about leveraging technology. This is a downloaded software. When I said it's all built in, but right now this first one is a downloaded software. Now the rest of it, we don't have to download. We'll go straight to the control panel. Of course, you can type the whole thing. Now control panel is a very old feature which Microsoft gives you. Now Microsoft has given this control panel for the servers and for these are the client machines. These are the end user machines. It's a home version of Windows. But actually, if you run this you don't have to run it, it's built in. All you need is permission to run it. If you run it on the server, you'll get far more information. So right now, I don't have access to a Windows server, so I'm just running it through this. So I'm starting with just a few of these. So we'll start with security and maintenance. If you notice, I went to the security and maintenance here and clicked on it. So once I click on the security and maintenance, I don't have much on the machine, but whatever is there, I'll show you. Now we go to the security thing, a tab, and then you open up your network firewall. So firewall, these are all Windows software. I'm not using any external firewall. The only antivirus we had is McAfee, which is right now subscription not paid, so it's not running. So each of these in the domain network, the firewall is switched on, and I keep these on, but I really don't connect anywhere. But if you see a public network, I can show you because this is where I'm connected to the internet. This is the internet name, the router in the house. It's called HomeNet B. So that's the thing we are using, and the firewall is on. Minimum security is there. Minimum. It's not a great firewall. It's just Windows firewall, and we kept it on, and it's working. Now, if we go to the, I can run it from here itself, or you can go back and do it from here also. You can go one at a time for your network security, then again back for the next one. You can run it to the menu. So from the virus security point of view, I told you we're running AVG, so all the settings are on. Actually, there are some requirements in PFRDA and IRDA that the auditor, actually what I'm telling is true for both the statutory auditor and the internal auditor, but both of them sometimes, if each one's capabilities, it depends. Generally, the IS audit could be done by someone, but generally it can be done by the internal auditor also. These are not very complex things. So what the internal auditor normally does is on behalf of the external auditor, he pings each machine in the network, checks whether it's on or off, and if it's on, then comes the headache. You have to check whether firewall settings are okay, the antivirus is running, etc. Now to do that, this is the easiest way to do it. This is Windows built in, no external software, no license, nothing. Whatever you paid for the Windows, it comes with all this. So it shows you, okay, right now it said I have this particular antivirus. It tells you that everything is up to date and In fact, it auto updates itself with some setting and does it. So everything is up to date, and these screenshots can be used as evidence. Otherwise, you can take printouts. It depends. I mean, how serious or how important the assignment is. Now, if you go to the account protection, now the account protection is not very great here because I've told you it's only a home machine, nothing much here. But what you could do is you can manage your accounts, and you could also go into your emails and settings. Actually, the Hotmail is there because of the certain Windows services insists on Hotmail. The rest of the mail, Office mail, is also Hotmail. Only thing they call it Office 365. So these are the two Windows mails, and I've not added any other account, your Gmail, Yahoo, not added. If you wish to have security, you can add them. And you can configure those. And if you have the sign-in options, not really used, so this face and fingerprint and all that, and you can retain your passwords at the Windows level. But one of the problems is hackers who could get access to your system will also be able to read this. So that's why generally nothing is configured here. And you have the access from work, school. Okay, what it really means is if you're on a network, if you're taking this office and plug, there is a possibility others may access, particularly if you have shared drives or common folders, there is a possibility they could access it. And somebody with enough knowledge can cause trouble. Otherwise, you'll have to work isolated, only access the internet, direct out. So if you're even accessing the machine next to you, you go out to the internet through the firewall, come back from the internet through the firewall again, and then access the machine next to it. Obviously, be slow, but if you're worried about safety, then that's better. Now, these are all the family users, the parental controls which I'll come to. And I don't sync the settings anywhere. Settings can be synced with desktop, laptop, mobile, and tablet. There are many companies which encourage their employees to use, particularly these NBFCs, they use tablets. Almost all companies encourage their employees to use mobiles for various things. They can even see the ERP on the mobile, dashboards on the mobile, and they lose the mobiles also. So if you don't have a what's called a MDM, mobile device management software, loss of an higher level employees synced mobile device is a threat to the, I mean, it's a definite threat which can materialize for data theft. Okay, what to do? The executives need the facility, give it to them. Otherwise, you could take a decision not to just sync the mail or something on the mobile, use an MDM and just leave it at that. So that's on the Windows security part. Now I'm also looking at this archived messages. Now, actually, I clicked on the left here. Left, you got a menu. This is Windows Home 10. Menus will change slightly if you have 7 or 8. If you have 10, then if you are professional, slightly it will change. If you're confused, just Google it up, you'll find it. I have not configured any menu. They're all default menus. So now this is on. It's showing me different days. And some days there was no problem. And some days there was some problem. So if I click it here, it has shown me what it has done. Some updates took place. But on some days, we had some issues. Now, those days are when this McAfee tried to start and we would have said not interested. So, see what these vendors try to do is, I didn't uninstall it. So what they try to do is time to time remind you, why don't you renew or do something like that. And I think there was a more serious error on one of these days. Okay, so you can see the error here. That was on the 15th, that was yesterday. You could see that this recovery stopped working. Many times, maybe just we stop the service. I mean, you're trying to shut down the machine. Then there's a recovery going on and say it doesn't matter. You shut down the machine, we'll see tomorrow, kind of. So maybe if when I started today, it must have corrected it. But what what sense does it make to an auditor? The auditor is interested in all these disasters, the days when services were stopped, they crashed. And if you went into the weeks here, you will get a much better thing, which is on this particular week, we have got bigger problems. There was a failure. Then we also have warnings. We have got Windows update failed, maybe it was okay 10 o'clock at night, so maybe just shut down. It would have said update and shut down, maybe just shut down. So it's giving me that warning. And then, of course, there are the standard ones. Now, these are like logs, LOGS. These are the event logs. I mean, what actually the machine was doing, what it was running, and I mean, what actually is the status of various things. This is more for analysis. But there are days when, times when an operator tells you the software crashed, I had to restart, or some story. At that point, you can pick up the date and you can examine the log. And if you don't see an entry here, then obviously he's bluffing. So nothing failed. Or if he's bluffing and says nothing failed, I completed successfully, then also you can check randomly, of course, to see whether, since we had this class on data analytics, 100% of these logs, of course, not from here, you have to go to event logs. 100% of the logs can be analyzed, and outliers will be pushed out, and the auditor will look only at those. If you are not, I mean, if you don't suspect the client so much or his staff so much, this should be okay. Visual look should be okay. Every month you audit or quarter or whatever. But if you're not happy with the reliability of the staff, then don't do this. You pull out all the data and analyze. You can run it through Power BI or any tool you like. I mean, it's any analytic tool. Now I'll just go back to this control panel, but I'm asking for administration tools. Okay, so now we've changed the menu slightly. So we have got another set of, it's all part of the control panel only. It makes it very easy. Windows makes it very easy to use. So I'm just quickly running to the options which are available in what is called the administrative tools. Now, all the tools will not show up here. This is a home version. If you want the tools like audit policy, for instance, or security policy, I'll have to download it. It's free. I mean, Windows doesn't charge, but they don't give it as a part of the home package. It is given as a part of the professional package. So if you're using the kind of Windows I'm using, home version, you will see some items missing here. Don't worry, you can download them. I mean, if you really want to learn, you don't have to buy a professional. Keep the home, just download all the missing programs. And then once you install, they'll all start appearing here. Now I'll just go through them one by one. So first we are going through what is called the component services. Now I don't have any entries here, but I'll explain what it is. Now Windows, actually it is Microsoft, who came out with this concept of COM-DCOM, component object model and distributed component object model. When they developed this languages, mainly it was competitor for Java, the ActiveX components. And if you go to any browser setting, it'll ask you a question: do you want to allow ActiveX, or shall I prevent them? Now, ActiveX programs are small Windows programs which can actually get deployed on the internet in client machines. Those of you who are doing an online filing, that's why it keeps asking you to update your Java and so on, because Java component objects are deployed in your web page or wherever it needs to run. Microsoft components also similarly, we call them, they're called Active-X. They get deployed. Now, if you have a concern on those component services, you can stop them here. But actually, as I told you, I have no component services here. ActiveX, don't use it at all. You could ask the question, why? See, if you're doing a lot of, in your audit, you'll at least have to have one machine where you're learning, your kind of R&D work kind of machine. Keep it as strong as possible, because first of all, we don't know the tools we're downloading, whatever experiments we are doing. We don't know how many vulnerabilities it will open up in the system. And Microsoft is not very strong that way. Linux is not friendly. So somewhere at a trade-off. So today I'm working with Microsoft. It's easier to learn. Once you're confident, move on to Linux. So I have no components to show you, but that's the first option. Computer management is our second option. Now here you can see a lot of stuff. Now many companies you go to, they'll tell you, we have got a scheduler. Now the RBI directors, IRD, all these regulators have said that the flow of data from one system to the other should be automatic and should not be handled by people. Actually, nobody's doing it right. What they do is they send it to a staging server, or they put in some temporary place or download in Excel and upload. But anyway, the point is, they say we have automated the job, so it will run every 1 hour, 5 minutes, something like that, they will tell you. Now you want to make sure they're telling you the truth. So if you clicked on this task scheduler, which I've clicked on now, it'll show you any task which has been scheduled. Right now, nothing is there, so nothing is running. But if you see here, we've got actually the Windows update. Only the updates are scheduled here. Nothing else is really scheduled. I'm right at the bottom here, so you can see the various things. The schedule is purely on the Windows side. There's nothing else there. So, but you can have scheduled jobs for backup, recovery, transferring data from system to system, and then you'd like to have the log of whether it's really done it, did not do it, etc. So you can save those logs, you can view them, etc. Is there any question? Now, if you went to the event viewer, and this makes a little more sense. See, in the event viewer, what happens is you will get all the, and actually it's loading. So you can see all the events here and how many errors we got, how many warnings, what is all the information. If I click on any one of them, you can see this changes. It's now start showing you all the information. And if you went into any one of them again, it'll show you all the days it ran, what it did, etc. Now, these are the logs you'll have to import into your analytic tool, whatever the tool is, Tableau or NIME or Power BI, Excel, whatever the tool is. And then you can analyze it and pull out all the exceptions. So if you go to the Windows logs, you have the application logs, the security logs, the setup logs. Actually, there are no errors because nothing serious is going on. System, of course, we do have warnings, but most of these will be all these clients and distributed com, those kind of things. I know maybe what I'm explaining is not too clear, but for instance, I took a distributed com. Now it says it needs specific settings. What it needs is a registry entry. Otherwise, the ActiveX won't work. And since we kicked out all the ActiveXs, it couldn't run. So it kind of recorded itself as an error or a warning or whatever. It's not critical. You can allow them. See, it depends how much faith you have in what you're doing. If you're learning and if you're working with open source on the open internet, be careful. Don't allow too much. Otherwise, it's fine. If you know where they're coming from, there's no problem. And then, of course, we have no forwarded events. I don't have any forwarded events. Then applications. Okay, we have these applications which we can actually, some of these, the key management services, etc. Okay, most of them I don't even enable the logs, but anyway, MS Office, yes, because we use a lot of Excel, MS Access, whatever publisher and so on. OpenSSH I don't use. There's no data there because I don't use most of this. So subscriptions we don't use, but whatever subscriptions are there, they are in the browser. All the digital certificates are in the browser. So if you can see all the logs here, one thing you'll have to decide what you want to see. Most of the time, you're probably looking at application logs. Who ran, I mean, it won't tell you who ran unless you're on the server. We are more interested in knowing when it ran, why they ran it, was it out of sequence, and those kind of things. Now, this is not much of use to the auditor, but sometimes you get a complaint for a consulting assignment and you're told machines are going slow. One of the problems is that one is an SSD, so it doesn't need anything. But the hard disks need to be defragmented. That is like compacted. All the loose data is brought together. It's done regularly, so it's now showing you 0 fragmented. But if you run it on your machine right now, any laptop, desktop, I'm very sure you just put optimize and then it'll start running. It'll speed up your machine. Most of this happens when they're doing at least what I've seen is when they do GST uploads or GST work and the files are large. And the reason is RAM is sitting with unwanted services. RAM is occupied as unwanted services and a hard disk is fragmented. This can be done on a regular basis. If you're, if you really have a lot of work, then better to put it on scheduler. So every day, fixed time, it will do it. Otherwise, you just do it whenever you want. So that's on the cleanup. Now, disk cleanup is when you want to recover space from your disk. So it will show you where your disks are. Okay, it will take a little while it has to run. So it will tell you right now there's nothing. Okay, I have 138 MB in the recycle bin. You can remove it up. You can remove clean up the system files and it's gone. So I run it again, it won't be there. So I run the D drive and okay, now it's got sitting there. So you have to amount of space we gained. Okay, I want to delete files, I deleted it. So once it's gone, it's gone. I run it again, it won't be there. So you can see the recycle bin is 0 bytes now. Now, when would you do it if you're particularly working on machines which are slowed down? These two will work well. It's not really an audit, it's more a consulting work. These are the logs I just showed you, the event viewers and so on. Now, as you go to the events, because this is what we saw earlier, as you go through these events, you can look at audit failures also. So then you can see what happened and why a particular log security failed. You'll have to analyze. Not everything, all failures are critical. It's not so bad. But if it's a client machine, you have to check. Now this SI is actually an adapter which helps you to connect up your nets, your hard disk to the internet. Particularly if you are sharing on a wireless, like you have network attached storage or something where you're sending data out, then configure this correctly. So right now I'm not configuring anything because I don't have any external connections. You'll have to check this when people are work from home. And in work from home, the mic and the speaker and the laptop are on one port. The camera is an IoT. It's an Internet of Things. So the camera port is different. Most hackers steal the camera port. So for those who are working from home, either the phone or the laptop, the computer, desktop, whatever, the camera port has to be hardened when it goes to the internet. These are the connections that they don't have 32 bit. So in 64-bit, okay, you have both. Now these are to connect you to databases, like whatever you have, MS Access, Oracle. Actually, I use a SQL called SQLite, SQLite. It's a very good SQL. It works perfectly, and it's very useful if you are doing audit work. You're getting your data, maybe Excel and Tableau are not doing the job right. Put it into SQLite and finish your queries. And then this performance monitor is something which helps you to identify what is really going on in the system. Whether your hardware is properly used, your RAM is properly used. Are you getting the best out of the CPU? If you find your idle time is very low and the CPU is struggling, then you have to check whether any background job, virus, spyware, malware, something is running. This gives you a good indication that unwanted stuff is eating up your computer time or resources. One of the common things is distributed denial of attack. What those thieves do is They put their software into multiple computers, including unsuspecting home computers, and use these home computers to attack third-party machines. So that chap is not spending any money on hardware. He's using somebody else's hardware to do the bad things on the internet. Now, the recovery drive, of course, all of you know that this is you'll back up for in case you crash the machine. You can go up to the last recovery point. And then if you have your register editor, I suggest you don't meddle with this for the time being. But anyway, if you slowly advance and then you move on, you can start meddling with the registry entries. We'll take the current user. Okay. So these are the values we could change, but I suggest you don't change anything till you are completely comfortable with these registry entries. Unless maybe the manual told you to do something. Instead of the registry editor this way, I will just go here. There is a utility called reg edit. If you do that, that's all the registry editor only. You can see here it's registry editor, but it's a lot safer to work with. It'll open the same screen, but it'll open exactly what you want to do. So instead of getting in here, and one of the common things is the policies. I don't have a mic. Basically, there's no policies on this machine, but generally you will find a password policy and audit policy and so on. See, if you have a business machine, there is a hardening document, there's a minimum things which the client would have done. So it'll all be there. Right now, this is nothing there, absolutely nothing done. But anyway, as you're learning, what I would suggest is you create policies, you do all those things. Then resource monitors. Okay, this is again, you have seen this in your task manager. It's almost the same thing. So you can see all your CPU is used, your memory is used, disk is used. This is done for performance. It's called computer performance evaluation. You normally have to do both the CPU and CPU storage, etc., as one block, and network usage. These tools will not check network. You need separate network monitoring tools. And then you have to tell your client that they are close to using up all the resources. They'll have to upgrade. They have to, because vendors will always tell you buy more RAM, buy bigger CPUs. But you as an auditor or a consultant know that by stopping unwanted services, you can definitely speed up the machine. Now, these are all the services which are running, not running, some of the stop. Generally, what you do is it's your own machine, so you stop it from time to time. But if you have got an old laptop which you're willing to practice with, you can start stopping services, trying to find out what each service is doing, how important it is. This is basically when you're doing a hardening document audit, you would like to know, did they really harden it, or they're just fooling the audit committee and the auditor and so on. For services, there's another utility. You can go straight into MS config, which does the same thing. So you will come back to the same thing, but only this is a lot easier. You can go straight, you'll get checkboxes. You can uncheck or check whatever you want. So instead of going to the menu I showed you in control panel, you can use MS config and do it straight away. And then, of course, the system configuration is the usual. It'll tell you what you want to do. How do you want to configure? When you're stopping services, just make sure they are not critical. For instance, McAfee I can stop, but AVG I will not stop, and so on. Also, don't stop TCP services, then your network gets affected. System information, it has got a list of what your hardware is, but for this, it's better you run Bellark Advisor because it gives you a lot more information. This is generally used for a spot check, but Bellark Advisor gives you the software, gives you everything, gives you the serial numbers, keys. It's much more useful to the auditor. Okay, task manager we saw, so that's not much. Firewall, etc. I showed you the other entry. And if you want to check your memory diagnostics, I'm not restarting it, so I'll just cancel it. But if you have memory problems, slots are not working, something like that, you could fix it. Now, to summarize, what did we learn here? Now, what we really learned was Windows has got a lot of logs. It has got a lot of small built-in tools which give you information on the hardware, software, installation, etc. Of course, Bellark was better. It also gives a lot of information on tasks running, tasks which they're called interrupted tasks. If you interrupted it, operator interrupted it, or what we call crashed tasks if the task kind of terminated on its own. It's called abnormal termination. And you also have the loads you can see on the CPU, the memory, the storage. Network you can't see, of course, because you need a separate tool for that. And it also tells you a lot on your database connectivity. Those who are using ACL will also have to use a ODBC for the Oracle or whatever they're connecting to. So all this information is available. Now these are the minimum. I mean, we just got into the minimum. So you could use these, run these straight away. The only thing extra you need to download is your Bellark Advisor. So I'll stop sharing the screen now. And I'm open to, in fact, I think all of us are open to questions at this point.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and it's a great learning session about practical things about the system. Today I came to know about very much things about the system and various checkpoints also. So we will definitely follow this, your learning, knowledge, sharing knowledge about these systems and in our practical scenarios. And we have a question for Sandeep sir. That's what is an alternative to physical verification of cash or asset during these COVID times when travel is restricted? By Mr. Vikas Kumar Agarwal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yes. So, the way we used to do it, is more, as I said, using some of the collaborative tools that we have. So, Zoom, for example, one where we have, and then the other option, is that the CCTV cameras are also there. So, you have to use the digital means to really do some of those cache verifications. Of course, you take controls. The other option would also be to take control of the PC of that person who's actually handling cache there and try to, reconcile and match the cache received as per system as well as whatever is available. So those are the methodology that you can use in COVID time when you can actually not visit the branch.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And yes, sir. That's it, sir. We don't have much questions right now. And so as a word of thanks and closing remark, it's a great learning session on technology as enabler of internal audit with so much of practical knowledge and experience by our eminent speaker. We, on behalf of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI, heartily thankful to all eminent speakers for sharing such a practical knowledge and experience with us. And I would like to close the session, and it's a great learning session. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.